The good thing about that definition of knowledge is that it basically tells you, what should, is this something that should go in my assignment? Is this something I've learned? Right? It gives you nice 3 questions to ask. Do I believe it? Is it true? Do I have a justification? Don't forget about this believing it. You should use your studies to learn how to make up your mind about something, to come to believe something. But the problem with it is its kind of philosophical nature. Right? It makes you think that knowledge is this sort of exalted state of belief. You have to get yourself into the state of mind called justified true belief. And we actually have a really good case in the Danish cultural canon, a movie called, I think the English translation is The One and Only. It's called Den Eneste Ene in Danish. Right? You may have seen this movie. It's a love story. One of the characters in this story is a psychologist, and she studied psychology for 7 years. So she's really smart about relationships. She just has a hard time explaining what she means, right, to her friends who need this important psychological knowledge to manage their relationships. So the tragedy there is she's stuffed full of justified true beliefs about the human psychology machine, right, and how relationships should work, but she has a hard time getting it out, hard time explaining it. So I'm going to suggest to you that you add to your definition of knowledge a rhetorical component, all right, a communication competence. And it goes like this. Knowing something is the ability to discuss it with other knowledgeable people, right? Or knowing something is the ability to hold your own in a conversation with other knowledgeable people. And hold your own is kind of a good way of putting it because it makes it sound a little bit like a boxing match or something, right? It's not just, it's a matter of being able to, you put out ideas into the conversation, and you can kind of defend them and support them. If you don't like boxing as a metaphor, which is fine. Probably half of you don't really like boxing as a metaphor. The other half of you are thinking, yes, this is exactly what I was hoping the university would be. There are other ways of thinking about this. Dancing, tango, for example. If I was to get into a boxing ring, that would be an embarrassing thing to watch. But if I was to get onto a dance floor and dance the tango, that would also be a very embarrassing thing to watch. In both cases, I'm incompetent. I'm not able to do these things, and so it would be a mess to watch me do it. But to know something is to be able to participate gracefully in a conversation with other equally matched people who have the same kind of knowledge that you have, right? And of course, you can test this in real life, right? You can test this by taking all those other knowledgeable people, the people in your classes, and having conversations with them, figuring out if you can talk to them, right? Just like there's 3 things we can think about when we think about what it means to make up your mind to form a justified true belief. We can think about justification, belief, and truth. There's also 3 things we can think about in terms of communication, of rhetoric. And there's lots of things we can think. Well, what would it mean to be able to converse? What is the skill of conversation? But I'm going to suggest to you 3 things to keep in mind. And these are things you will use when you're thinking about your writing, right? The first is, have you all been told at some point that there's no such thing as a stupid question? Yeah. Right? Have you all discovered that that's a lie? Right? There is such a thing as a stupid question. You are often the one asking it, and you're certainly often the one hearing it. This is all part of learning, right? In a group of very knowledgeable people, there will be certain things that are silly or stupid or whatever you want to call it to ask. Questions that come out of your ignorance, right? They don't come out of your knowledge, right? And so it's very important when you're having a conversation with knowledgeable people to know the difference between a good and a bad question. And part of that has to do with recognizing it as a good question and then being able to formulate a good answer. Right? And here at CBS and many other social science programs in the country, we work with this quite deliberately because we ask you to make a problem statement or a research question. Right? We really ask you to work with that when you're developing your projects, right? So really think about what is a good question, given everything we know about the subject, what's actually a good question to ask, right? And that's at the very highest level, but all the way down to small details, matters of fact, definitions of concepts, and so forth. They're good and bad questions given whatever field and discipline you're in. So learn those, right? Learn to recognize them and learn to ask them, right? That's an important question. This will really be useful for you in your writing. But there's something else, and this is quite important for working on your style. People who work in the same field, who share a body of knowledge, generally have a shared sense of humor about things. And this is because if you share a lot of knowledge, if you know a lot of things in common, there are certain things that now become funny, right? It's not, there's a really good show on TV, or was on TV, called The Big Bang Theory. You may have seen this. It's a sitcom about physicists, right? And they find quarks wildly amusing if you tell the joke correctly, and you have to have some background knowledge about physics in order to understand the joke, right? This sort of disciplinary sense of humor is what you're looking for, right? And you can try this out. As you learn more and more and more, as you talk with other people who learn and know the same things, you'll realize, oh, wait a minute, these things are actually kind of comical. These things are kind of funny, right? And you can use that in your writing. You can use that awareness in your writing, right? So do that, learn that. And then there's our last thing, and this is getting increasingly dicey, increasingly important in this age of offense and outrage and social media. You have to know that a body of disciplined knowledge finds certain things offensive. There's certain things that are not okay to say, certain ideas that are inappropriate, right? Now, you might say, I'm reminding you of this, you should discover the boundary of offense in the discourse in order to stay away from it. I don't know if you've all read, some of you probably have as part of your cultural upbringing, read Rania, the Daughter of Thieves, Rania Rauadata, this very famous Scandinavian children's story. Now, she's very daring, let's put it that way, brave. And she's told to be very, very careful at the Gap of Doom, I believe it's called. And she's also told to be very careful down by the river. And so what she, of course, does is she goes right down to the river and is very careful there. And she goes right up to the gates of doom and is very careful there, right? So when she's told to be careful of these things, she is not afraid of them. She doesn't draw back from them, just stay very far away from them. She engages with them with care, right? And this is an important thing to keep in mind about these boundaries, is that you want to teach yourself not just that they're there, but you want to, if you're going to cross them, if you're going to cause offense, you just want to make sure you do it on purpose, right? If you're going to provoke somebody, make them angry or offend them in an academic discourse, there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay, right? Just make sure you do it deliberately, because it feels better for the person that's getting offended as well. If you offend them deliberately. It's like you push a button and they go, ooh, ow, yeah, you got me, right? And then the conversation can move on from there. If you provoke on purpose, you can take the conversation somewhere with that emotion, right? If you just want to be friendly and nice, that's okay too, right? I'm not telling you to do one thing or another. I'm just saying that there are constructive ways of causing provocation.